name is Cheryl Darrow, and I'm 18 years old. This is the first, and probably the only time I'll ever tell this story in full. Not because I think it'll go viral, not because I want sympathy, but because my therapist said something that made my throat close up. The body keeps score, and silence is still a score. So I'm writing this like a confession, like a bruise you finally stop covering. I've been on my own for a little while now. Not completely. Life doesn't magically become easy because you move out, but far enough that the quiet is real. The kind of quiet where you can hear your own thoughts without someone else's needs stomping through them. I have a sister, Maisie, who's about 10 years younger than me. She was an unplanned pregnancy, and from what scraps of conversation I overheard as a kid, she almost didn't make it. My mother's pregnancy was hard on her body. Hospital visits, complications, constant fear. My father hovered like the floor might fall out from under them if he blinked. When Maisie was born, it was like my parents didn't just become parents again. They became devotees. At first, I understood. I was a kid. I knew babies needed attention. I knew my mother cried in the bathroom and came out with puffy eyes like she'd swallowed a storm. I told myself it would calm down once the danger passed. But the danger passed, and their obsession didn't. I started feeling like the other kid, the one they remembered only when something needed doing. They didn't hit me, they didn't starve me, they didn't lock me in a closet, but they did something quieter, something that takes longer to notice. They rewrote my role in the family until I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was a convenience. And a free babysitter. By the time I was in middle school, I didn't get asked if I wanted to watch Maisie. I got told. If I complained, my mother's face would tighten like I'd insulted her personally. "You're the older one," she'd say. "Be responsible." My father would add, "Your sister needs you," as if Maisie needing me justified my parents not parenting. The favoritism became undeniable starting around my 11th birthday. That was the first year they insisted I let Maisie blow out my candles because she was still little and cried at the sight of a birthday cake that wasn't hers. I remember standing in front of the cake, the candles lit, the heat brushing my cheeks, my whole body buzzing with anticipation because birthdays were supposed to be the one day you felt special. And then my mother scooped Maisie up, pressed her tiny hands together like she was praying, and said, "Let her do it. Look at her. She's upset." I said, "But it's my birthday." My father's voice dropped into that tone, calm, warning, the kind that says, "Don't embarrass me. Cheryl, don't be selfish." Selfish. That word landed like a slap. So I watched my little sister lean forward and blow out my candles, while my parents laughed like it was adorable. They relit the candles after, like that fixed anything. It didn't. Because it wasn't about the flames. It was about the fact that my moment was treated like a toy they could hand to her to stop her crying. The same thing happened the next year, and the year after that. Like a ritual, like my birthday belonged to Maisie and I was just the guest of honor who wasn't allowed to enjoy it too much. Maisie also started getting presents on my birthdays. Just something small, my mother would insist, like the words made it harmless. I never got presents on hers. When I asked why, my mother shrugged. "You're a girl," she said once. "You don't need all that attention. Let your sister have her fun." I can still hear the casual cruelty in it. Like my feelings were a silly accessory I should have outgrown. And it wasn't just birthdays. If I wanted to do something, Maisie had to want it too, or it got vetoed. Movies, restaurants, outings, everything had to orbit around whatever made her squeal with joy. If I complained, I was accused of making it hard. So I learned the safest way to survive. I stopped wanting things out loud. I locked myself in my room with my books and video games. It wasn't even that I loved being alone. It was that it was the only place I wasn't constantly being drafted into someone else's happiness. Maisie hated that. She developed this princess complex early, demanding, bossy, loud. She treated me like her personal assistant. She had a nickname for me, something childish and mocking that she used whenever she wanted me to jump. I hated it. The sound of it made my stomach turn hot. If I didn't give her what she wanted, she'd cry. If she cried, she'd run to our parents. And then my parents would come down on me like I'd committed a crime. "You know she's sensitive," my mother would hiss. "She's just a kid," my father would say, as if I wasn't also a kid. Just a kid who apparently didn't get to be sensitive. There were so many fights that by the time I hit my teens, I started speaking less. I started shrinking. I started measuring my words like stepping stones across a river that could swallow you whole if you slipped. I put a lock on my bedroom door after Maisie burst in on me one day while I was changing. I screamed, slammed the door, and my mother shouted at me for being dramatic. My father tried to make me take the lock off, and something in me snapped. Not loudly, not in a movie scene way, more like a wire burning through. I yelled, I cried. I said, "I deserve privacy." My parents acted offended, like I'd asked for something obscene. But after a few days of me refusing to back down, they dropped it. Mostly because arguing with me was inconvenient, and Maisie had already moved on to her next demand. They hired a teen babysitter for a while when I got older. It was the closest thing to freedom I'd felt in years. I could breathe. I could sit in my room and exist without being ordered around. Then the babysitter quit because Maisie wouldn't listen, and my parents tried to avoid paying her by saying she did a bad job. The girl got adults involved. My parents paid, begrudgingly, like fairness was a punishment. They hired another babysitter. That one stayed, but my parents still made it clear. If I had a day off from school, if I had free time, if I wasn't at work, Maisie was my responsibility. So I started taking extra shifts at my part-time job just to stay away from my own house. By the time high school ended, my relationship with my parents had devolved into polite silence. I lived in the same building as them, but emotionally, I was already gone. And yet, at my graduation, they had the nerve to brag to other parents that they were the reason I worked so hard. They weren't completely wrong. I did work hard, just not because they inspired me. I worked hard because I was counting down, because every assignment I finished, every shift I survived, every dollar I saved felt like a rung on the ladder out of that house. Then July came, my birthday month, 18. The age people talk about like it's a door opening. I told myself maybe this year would be different. Maybe my parents would finally see me. Maybe they'd realize I was an adult now, not just an accessory to Maisie's childhood. I even let myself hope for something small and stupid, like my favorite restaurant, like a cake that looked like it was meant for me. I didn't know yet how badly I'd underestimated them. I didn't know that my 18th birthday would become the night the whole family finally saw what had been happening behind closed doors for years. But the cracks were already there, and I was already tired of pretending I didn't feel them. I didn't ask for much for my 18th birthday. I didn't ask for a big party. I didn't ask for friends. I didn't even ask for gifts. I just wanted, once, something that felt like it was actually about me. So when my parents told me they'd planned a combined celebration for my high school graduation and my birthday, I let myself hope. That was my first mistake. We drove to the place in silence. I recognized it the moment we pulled into the parking lot, a local knockoff Chuck E. Cheese. Flashing lights, screeching kids, sticky floors, the kind of place you take children when you want them distracted and sugared up. My stomach sank. This was the place they always chose, not because I liked it, because Maisie loved it. Inside, it was exactly how I remembered. Arcade machines humming, kids running past with tickets spilling out of their hands, parents shouting over the noise. I was surrounded by children half my age having the time of their lives, and I was supposed to be celebrating becoming an adult. I told myself to endure it, just like always. We sat at a long table with relatives I hadn't seen in a while. Aunts, uncles, cousins. Everyone smiled at me and said congratulations. Some of them hugged me. Some asked about my plans. I noticed something, though. Every conversation drifted back to Maisie. She was bouncing in her seat, demanding tokens, tugging on my mother's sleeve, whining about pizza. My parents jumped at every sound she made, like trained reflexes. Then it was time for cake. My mother came out holding it carefully, and for a second I felt relief, until I really looked. The cake was pink, decorated with white flowers piped along the edges. It looked like something pulled straight from a little girl's fantasy. My name was written on it, sure, but there were only 10 candles. 10. My parents didn't even set it in front of me. They placed it directly in front of Maisie. "Okay, sweetie," my mother said brightly. "Go ahead." Something inside me finally snapped. Maisie leaned forward, already smiling, already claiming the moment like she'd done for years. The room felt like it tilted, like every birthday before this one came rushing back at once. I don't remember deciding to cry. I just did. Ugly, uncontrollable sobs tore out of me, loud enough that the noise of the arcade seemed to drop away. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. I could feel eyes on me, confused, startled, embarrassed. I stood up so fast, my chair scraped loudly against the floor. "I can't do this anymore," I choked out. 8 years of swallowed words poured out of me like poison, finally finding air. I talked about the candles, the presents, the venues, the way my birthdays had never been mine, the way my parents always chose her. I cried and spoke and cried some more, my voice breaking, my hands shaking. I didn't care anymore how it looked. For the first time in my life, I refused to disappear quietly. When I was done, the room was silent. I walked outside and sat by the family car, my chest heaving. The cool air burned my lungs. A few relatives followed, my aunt, my grandparents, a cousin. They apologized. They said they didn't know, that my parents had kept the cake covered, that they thought I was okay with it because that's what they'd been told. I looked at them and said, I was never okay with it. That's when my father stormed out. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he shouted. "You embarrassed your mother. She's crying." I stood up, tears streaking my face, and said the words I'd never dared to say before. "You are bad parents, and you know exactly why." The rest of the family descended on him like a wave. Voices raised, accusations flew. Someone shouted, "How could you let this go on?" Another yelled that they'd all watched it happen. My father shrank under the noise, backed toward the restaurant doors. My mother came out later, eyes red, face crumpled. She apologized awkwardly, offering to redo the party somewhere else. It felt empty. Too late. My grandfather stepped forward then, his voice firm and cutting. "You don't get to undo 8 years with one cake," he said. I walked away again. Inside, I later learned, Maisie stayed behind, eating cake, opening my presents. One of them was a brand new smartphone. When she wasn't allowed to keep it, she threw it against the wall and shattered it in a screaming tantrum. My grandparents took me home with them that night. I remember sitting in their old minivan, staring out the window, feeling numb. Justice didn't feel like relief. It felt like exhaustion, and it wasn't over yet. I didn't go home that night. My grandparents' house smelled like laundry detergent and old books, the kind of safe, neutral scent that doesn't demand anything from you. They let me sleep in the guest room without questions, without lectures. My grandmother tucked a blanket around my shoulders like I was little again, and I stared at the ceiling until exhaustion finally pulled me under. When I woke up the next morning, the weight was still there, but it had shifted. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It was finality. I didn't speak to my parents for days after that. My phone lit up with missed calls from my mother, then my father. I ignored them all. Every time I thought about answering, I remembered the pink cake, the 10 candles, the way they placed it in front of my sister without hesitation. Silence felt like the only boundary I had left. The following weekend, my grandparents asked me to go to dinner with them. Just dinner, they said, nothing fancy. I hesitated, but eventually agreed. I was tired of hiding, tired of feeling like I was the one who had done something wrong. When we walked into the restaurant, I froze. There were balloons, a banner with my name on it, a chocolate cake, brown, simple, unmistakably mine, with 18 candles arranged carefully on top. And my parents were there. They smiled when they saw me. Not warm smiles, nervous ones. The kind you wear when you're hoping not to be rejected. They called it my belated graduation and birthday dinner. I smiled back, because I didn't know what else to do. One good party doesn't erase 8 years of neglect. It doesn't rewind childhood. It doesn't give you back the moments you learned to stop wanting things. I went through the motions. I said thank you. I blew out the candles while everyone clapped. Maisie sat at the table with her arms crossed, her lip curled. She didn't sing. She didn't smile. The moment I blew out the candles, she screamed. Not a whine, not a cry. A full, ear-splitting scream that made people turn in their seats. My parents rushed her out, faces pale, and brought her back later looking shaken. She sulked the rest of the night, glaring at me like I'd stolen something precious from her. I opened gifts with everyone watching. The new smartphone was there, replaced. Then my grandfather cleared his throat and handed me a set of keys. They'd all chipped in to buy me a car. It wasn't new, an old white sedan, but it was clean, solid, and mine. I loved it instantly. Maisie didn't. She screamed again, this time louder, demanding a car too. My mother dragged her into the bathroom, and my father stared at the floor like a man who'd finally realized how deep the hole was. The words started then, from relatives, not quietly this time. She acts like this because you raised her that way. You turned her into a princess who can't hear no. You're setting her up for failure. I didn't feel satisfied hearing it. I felt tired. I started driving the car immediately. It became my escape. Windows down, music loud, silence replaced by motion. Then, only days later, Maisie took a hammer to it. She smashed 2 side windows, cracked the windshield so badly the car couldn't be driven. She screamed when my parents tried to stop her, flailing, biting, thrashing like a trapped animal. My grandfather nearly cried when he saw the damage. That was the moment things crossed from denial into panic. Maisie was grounded. Then, after more arguments than I was present for, my parents made the decision to send her to boarding school. My mother sobbed for days. My father didn't waver. "It's the only way to start fixing what we broke," he said. I moved out soon after. My grandfather helped me find a job through one of his friends. It was far enough away that commuting from my parents' house would have been miserable. Finding an apartment wasn't easy. I had to get a credit card just to qualify. A tiny studio, barely bigger than my old bedroom. It felt like freedom. My parents tried to call. I answered occasionally. Every conversation was stiff, careful, like we were strangers, afraid of saying the wrong thing. Maisie hated boarding school. She hated the clothes, the rules, the structure. She tried lying, manipulating, bullying. None of it worked. Cameras were everywhere. Consequences followed. She attempted a hunger strike. It lasted 2 days. Then she picked fights, got beaten up by other girls when she pushed too far. She blamed everyone but herself. She couldn't understand why the world wouldn't bend. My mother tried sneaking her junk food during visits, got caught. My parents fought, loudly. Then things escalated. That's when even the school said enough. She was sent to a long-term mental health ward. My mother wanted to bring her home. My father said no. They fought. My mother grabbed a bottle and hit him in the face with it. It shattered. Blood everywhere. Police, hospital, my mother taken away in a cruiser. She was committed for evaluation. I heard all of this secondhand, pieced together from phone calls and hushed conversations. It felt unreal, like listening to someone else's nightmare. My mother was diagnosed with serious mental health issues tied to past trauma. She was medicated, demoted at work, allowed to work from home. My parents started sleeping in separate rooms. They lost me, they lost Maisie, and they were left alone in a house full of echoes. On my 19th birthday, my grandparents threw me another party, a small one, at a restaurant I liked. My parents came. Maisie was allowed a short supervised visit from the ward. She sat there glaring at me, thinner now, eyes sharp with resentment. When I blew out the candles, she didn't scream. She cried. Ugly, loud sobs, demanding pizza, gifts, attention. She dropped to the floor and cursed at my parents before trying to storm out, copying me in her own twisted way. My grandfather stopped it. "She gets nothing," he said firmly. "Not this time." She was taken away, kicking and screaming, the next morning. And I went back to my apartment, alone, free, but not whole. Because freedom, I learned, doesn't always come with joy right away. Sometimes it just comes with space to finally feel everything you were never allowed to. People think freedom is loud. They imagine champagne moments, big breaths, smiling selfies with keys in your hand and the door closing behind you forever. For me, freedom was quiet. It was waking up in my studio apartment and realizing no one was going to burst in demanding something. No one was going to call my name like a summons. No one was going to tell me I was selfish for wanting a little space. Just silence. At first, the silence scared me. I didn't know what to do with it. I filled it with noise, music, podcasts, the hum of the city outside my window, anything to drown out the feeling that if I stopped moving, everything I'd buried would come rushing up. And it did. At night, mostly, I'd lie awake replaying birthdays like scenes from a movie I couldn't turn off. The pink cake, the candles, the way my parents' hands moved automatically toward my sister every single time, like muscle memory. Therapy helped, slowly. My therapist told me something else I didn't want to hear. You weren't just neglected. You were trained to erase yourself. That sentence hurt more than anything my parents ever said, because it was true. I learned how to make myself smaller, how to accept crumbs with a smile, how to measure my worth by how useful I was to other people. Unlearning that feels like pulling glass out of your skin, one shard at a time. My parents kept trying. They texted, they called. Sometimes my mother cried on voicemail, her voice thin and trembling, apologizing in circles. My father sounded different now, quieter, cautious, like he was afraid of saying the wrong thing and losing me completely. But every conversation felt off, like we were reading from scripts that didn't match anymore. They wanted forgiveness. I wanted acknowledgement. Not just "we're sorry," but "we chose her over you. We failed you. We saw you hurting and didn't stop." They never quite said those words. My grandfather once told me, gently, that my parents were drowning in guilt, that they were working extra hours to pay for Maisie's treatment, that the house felt empty without either of us there. "They've lost everything," he said, in a way. I nodded, but I didn't feel triumphant. I felt sad, because losing everything was something I'd been practicing for years. Maisie stayed in the ward. From what I heard, therapy helped in small, uneven ways. She was no longer allowed junk food, no special treatment, no bending rules. She hated it. She screamed, she cried, she lied. Cameras caught everything. My father told me once, carefully, like he was walking on broken glass, that Maisie didn't understand why my birthday wasn't hers anymore. "She really believes it belongs to her," he said. That sentence explained more than he probably realized. In her world, my life had always been an extension of hers. My parents built it that way. They taught her that what was mine was negotiable, transferable, disposable. Therapy didn't fix that overnight. Sometimes Maisie blamed me. Sometimes she blamed my parents more. Sometimes she just raged at the universe for not obeying her anymore. I didn't visit her. I wasn't ready. My 19th birthday passed quietly after the incident at the restaurant. I celebrated the date a week later, the belated day my grandparents had chosen, because my actual birthday felt poisoned now. I was okay with that. Traditions can be rewritten. What surprised me most wasn't the anger. That part made sense. It was the grief. Grief for a childhood I never got. Grief for parents who could have been better. Grief for a sister who might have been different if things had gone another way. And grief for the version of myself who kept hoping. There were days I wondered if I was cruel for keeping my distance, if I was punishing my parents too harshly, if I should try harder. Then I'd remember how it felt to sit at that table, watching my sister blow out my candles while my parents smiled, and the guilt would fade. I'm not no contact with my parents. I'm not fully reconciled either. We exist in this strange middle space, low contact, careful conversations, no pretending everything is fine. My mother is still in therapy, medicated, tired. My father carries himself like a man who finally understands the cost of his silence. They don't ask me to come home anymore. That's progress, I guess. As for me, I'm doing okay. I learned how to budget, how to cook meals that aren't microwave dinners, how to pay bills on time, how to sit alone without feeling like I'm about to be needed any second. Some days are easier than others. Some days I feel strong, independent, proud. Other days I feel 19 going on 90, exhausted from carrying things I shouldn't have had to. But I don't regret leaving. I don't regret speaking up. And I don't regret walking away from people who only valued me when I was convenient. What I do know is this: I finally get to celebrate my life without asking permission. And that might not look like joy yet, but it looks like mine.